Moment.
Okay.
We are on.
Thank you. The meeting of the Committee of Parent and Community Engagement of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Thank you for joining the January 4th, 2022 meeting. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Carr.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Present.
Director Simpson.
Present.
And Chair Taylor.
In attendance.
We have 5 committee members present, and we also have President Peterson joining the committee tonight.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our listening audience.
One moment.
Yeah, I saw them on earlier.
Yes, it looks like their microphone is muted. There we go.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Esta junta escolar se transmitirá en español para aquellas personas que lo necesiten. Para escuchar esta junta escolar en español, por favor marque el número 312-626-6799. Repito, 312-626-6799 y ponga el número de identificación o código 608-130-5362. Repito, el código de identificación es 608-130-5362. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Madam Secretary. Can you now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, asking everyone to ensure that your devices are muted so that it does not interfere?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, pursuant to Board Rule 1.06, this meeting is being conducted virtually. Board members may be participating from the Central Service Building. In order to allow as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube screen. The links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Make this bigger. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. Individuals who wish to speak on tonight's items were required to register in advance. I ask those who are waiting to speak to remain on the platform until you're called upon to speak. Just as a reminder, Robert Rules of Order. I think I just froze. Robert Rules of Orders dictates that all comments should be directed towards the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests are to be directed towards the chair, who will then determine the most efficient way to address them. All speakers are asked to state their name and spell their last name before proceeding with their comment. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and 15 seconds to speak. After the speaker time is up, they may continue to follow the meeting at one of the broadcast options mentioned previously. To ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind, including inappropriate language, will not be tolerated. The chair reserves the right to remove anyone engaging in such behavior from this platform. Those removed from the platform may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, he or she will not be allowed to rejoin the platform. Written testimony may be submitted to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@Milwaukee, spelled all the way out, .k12.wi.us. Also, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting https://milwaukeepublic.ic-board.com. Madam Secretary, what is the first item of business for tonight?
The first item on tonight's agenda is item number 1, a report with possible action regarding data and progress associated with the Office of Civil Rights, the OCR report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Administration, you have any comments on this item?
Good evening, Chair Taylor and members of the committee. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. The item before you this evening related to the monthly report associated with improving the district and school climate by providing schools with resources to support positive school behavior. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Matthew Boswell to present the January report. In addition, we have Mr. Leon Gross from Audubon Middle and High School will also provide some of the strategies that are working at their school community. After the presentation, we'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Mr. Boswell.
Yep. Good evening, Chair Taylor, members of the committee, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of the Department of Student Services. I will take you through the discipline disproportionality updates and progress for the month of December. So as always, we start off with our 5 priorities for success, which everything is grounded in terms of to increase academic achievement and accountability, improve district and school culture, develop our staff, ensure fiscal responsibility and transparency, and strengthen community communication and collaboration. Slide 3 is our reporting for 2021 and 22. The monthly reporting associated with disproportionality for the 21-22 school year will focus on the following as every month: promote and provide resources to schools on alternatives to suspension, including the alternatives to suspension toolbox, work with schools to make certain counseling and supportive services are utilized, analyze, and evaluate individual school data related to suspensions to determine best course of action to address disproportionality, continue and expand book studies, and form district committees to identify, develop, and implement strategies to reduce suspensions. Updates from last month. Continue providing courageous conversations about race, professional development, 100% of staff members with an additional 9 sessions in January in conjunction with the board resolution 1920R-005. As stated before, have begun our lead series with school leadership. Continue update from last month, slide 5. Identify schools with most suspensions and conducted data analysis on a variety of school metrics. Showcase connections to the resolution. Focus groups made recommendations for the code of conduct. In terms of those focus groups, just to give some detail, on Monday, November 8th, 2021, our school leadership focus group met. On Monday, November 15th, 2021, our teacher focus group met. On Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, our student focus group met. On Monday, November 29th, 2021, our parent focus group met. And on Wednesday, December 1st, 2021, we had a community conversations about the code of conduct scheduled for Wednesday, January 12th as our community focus group, which we have invited different community-based organizations. We will continue to invite them up to January 12th for their feedback and also for their collaborative efforts towards addressing this concern that we all want to improve within our district, just to give you an update. Additionally, district-wide work groups will make updates to the code of conduct. That is the overall shift. Like I said before, we will be coming back to the board once all those series of meetings have taken place. We'll be coming back to the board with recommendations. That is the crux of our behavioral management system within our district, is to truly understand the importance of participating in the citywide discipline committee and being able to develop and create a student code of conduct that we can speak to that will then control any suspensions within our school district. And I want to just keep really hammering on that because that process by itself is a large portion of getting to where we need to be as a district. We continue to push out criminalization of Black girls in schools. and our reentry protocols. 6, resources for schools prevention and alternatives to suspension. Monthly update to all discipline champions, highlighting strategies to prevent students leaving the classroom without permission, which was identified as one of the outstanding issues that needed to be addressed. District equity leadership team met for our second session as we had identified earlier in the previous month that we had originally met for our first session. Identify areas to integrate courageous conversation about race protocols, create opportunities for staff members to practice protocols. Next slide, ensure supportive services are utilized. Conducted focus groups, data drives, observations, and action planning at identified schools. Documented over 470 school-based discipline work group meetings. Recorded use of classroom strategies within PLP, classroom behaviors. Top strategy, acknowledge verbal one-on-one conversation and parent contact was documented. Next slide, suspension data. Discipline data through December 31st, 2021, in comparison to 2019-2020 year to date, we had 9,269 suspensions documented. In 2021-22, we had 9,238, so it is slightly down. During the month of December, we had 2,180 suspensions documented for the month of December, and is broken down by ethnicity categories as recommended. In reference to those suspensions, December alternatives to suspensions that were used, we had 123 documented cases of conference. We had 1,072 documented cases of administrative counsel. We had 117 detentions issued as alternatives to suspension, 68 incidents of mediation to use as alternatives to suspensions, 11 referrals to bid teams, 7 repair and harm circles, and 27 restorative conferences. Next slide, continue and expand book studies. Held courageous conversations about race exploration in December for elementary teachers. Identify opportunities to integrate courageous conversations about race through district policies and practices with our adult leadership team. Completed 2 sessions of push-out cohort, facilitated community schools, professional development on courageous conversation about race on December 23rd, 2021. District committees to reduce suspension. As mentioned and as detailed, the code of conduct focus groups. We have met with every focus group. We are now in the community focus group. And then we will go into reconstructing our student code of conduct, which upon completion, we will bring back those recommendations to the Board of School Directors for approval. Quarterly community conversations, documented over 135 student discipline committees, planned student focus groups throughout January and February, discussing district climate and strategies to reduce suspensions. Next steps, offer courageous conversations about race, DELC session in January, explorations with teachers at identified elementary schools. We will continue to facilitate focus groups and observations at identified schools with creation of school-based action plan, analyze mid-year data review and action planning, and schedule district-wide collaborative committees to update the code of conduct for the 2022-23 school year. Additionally, I would just like to make sure any information requests have been fulfilled. We provided 3 individuals that had made previous informational requests with the board, or with the Office of Board Governance. We fulfilled all such requests, and that concludes my portion of the monthly progress report. So at this time, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Leon Gross, who's one of our outstanding principals at Audubon Middle and High School, as they are highlighted as our School of the Month.
Chair Taylor and members of the committee, my name is Leon Gross, and I'm the proud principal at Audubon Middle School, High School campus, also known as Audubon Technology and Communications Center. And it is a privilege to be able to share with you this evening some of the strategies, the intentional strategies, as well as action plans that we have aligned with the district's mission in reducing disproportionality to support achievement at all levels. And so as you see on the first slide, our mission statement at Audubon is to support our students through 4 essential pillars. And those pillars include community, technology, college and careers, as well as embracing culturally responsive practices. Some of the demographics that you see here, first I want to highlight that as you can see, there's a celebration on this slide because our mission is to prepare our students for post-secondary success, beginning as young as 11 years old or in 6th grade, and helping them to matriculate through our system with a core value system that again is centered around sharing their student voices. And so as you see, our student population is right around 843 students. Our staff that's represented on this slide is only half of our campus. So in totality, when you look at both schools, we're closer to 100 staff members that, and I want to preface there, we include our paraprofessionals and other support staff and not only teaching staff in our mission to become one of the highlight schools around reducing disproportionality of discipline. From the standpoint of enrollment, the majority of our students are Hispanic, where you see 63% of those, and then the second largest group represents African Americans. And so this is the slide I would like to take just a minute to speak to, as it shows here some, again, growth in the area of the reduction related to suspensions as well as referrals. And when you look at the far left side of the slide, you will see where the referrals in 2017, 2018 eclipsed the 1,000 mark. And the suspensions were just under 962, right under 1,000. But throughout the course of several years, we really wanted to tackle this and reduce it through the inclusion of collaboration, student voice, as well as other entities in the school. And as you can see, there was a dramatic decrease in 2018-19 with a slight uptick in 2019-20. But then again, this year we are celebrating our lowest output thus far. And so if I can just take a moment to share with you on the following slide some of our strategies that we put in place. And so I really highlighted this slide, student voice, because that is really the essential element to our success. When we include the students in decision-making process, then it adds value to who they are, as well as the purpose for their learning. And so again, in support of some of the initiatives that the district has put out, the Student Discipline Committee meets monthly. And again, this committee is comprised of both middle school and high school students. So again, we're not looking at highlighting one entity over the other. We want to make sure that our young people are groomed in a way where they can become advocates for themselves at an early age, and then carry that over to one day potentially serving as a member of the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee. And so this particular discipline committee does speak directly to referrals that are submitted in our Infinite Campus database system, as well as reasoning behind some of the suspensions. More importantly, their voices are at the table when we're talking about how do we compromise so that, one, it does not appear as though it is an us versus them system, but more of a collaborative and a community-driven system that, again, underlines our restorative practice preface. And so, some of the other areas are you see school community building. And what that really aligns to is, again, intentionality around the teachers themselves creating a PLC, professional learning community, that centers around culturally responsive practices. And again, this particular group is also made up of middle school teachers, as well as high school teachers, and the voices that come from the Student Discipline Committee. So when we're talking about professional learning opportunities. Their voices are at the table to help us understand what they need the most. And so again, this underscores the value of who they are, as well as the validation of why they are there. Updated cell phone policies, we have looked at these. Again, we know that this is not an anomaly at Audubon, but it is something, maybe even a phenomenon, where we believe that some of the young people are more attached to the cell phones than they are really any other piece that they may have on their personal property. But again, with respect to that, we understand that this is essential to them. And so how do we invite their voices to the table so that our teachers are not spending time disciplining students around a cell phone being present in a classroom versus using those instructional minutes to increase our academic performance? And again, that alone, when we included that voice at the table with those students, that reduced our suspension rates almost 30%. And so again, it was a collaborative effort and a compromise that says we need each other. Our motto at Audubon is we're all we are. And so from that perspective, we're not looking to invite other voices to the table, except for those that are in the family first. And then from there, we can share with them our underlying purpose, as well as our promise to each other around how to become a productive community. And so the final piece there around submitted code of conduct recommendations, again, we're always looking at what is the appropriate conduct? What is the appropriate consequence? And how do we also include celebrations in those consequences? Because we do have a large number of students who are doing great things at Audubon. And again, on behalf of our school and our community, I am proud to say that we are not perfect. However, as you can see, when we invite voices to the table, it does make a difference. And again, we are proud to say that we are making strides in the right direction. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation, and we are ready to entertain any questions that you may have at this time. Also, just to let you know, we have Mr. John Jagaman online also from the office as well. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. I'm going to take questions in reference to the school part with the principal that's here, and then we'll go to the public comments, just because I want to make sure we break those up and we're respectful. So any committee member have any questions or comments in reference for the principal that's here with us tonight, the administration of the school? Vice Chair O'Halloran.
Thank you. And I don't know if you saw me chuckle when you said that some children are very attached to their cell phones, because that is a struggle I'm having with my child currently. So I totally understand that. And I think that is so interesting that you can attribute 30% reduction in suspensions due to that change in policy. So I want to thank you for inviting that student voice to the table and coming up with a policy that works for them, as well as administration. Like, a collaborative approach to problem solving is clearly the best way forward. And I would just ask that whatever that cell phone policy change, if you can share that, not necessarily at this specific moment, if you have it handy, great. But if that can be just, disseminated to other schools, that would be great. If you've been able to reduce your suspensions by 30% as a result, I think that's like the type of feedback that the best practice that we should be sharing amongst all schools. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Vice Chair O'Halloran. President Peterson. You're muted.
I was hoping that the principal would specify what was the changes in policy. I know some other schools have had struggles with that. And if you could just briefly explain what it was and what it is now, I'm very curious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Administration.
Chair Taylor and members of the committee, Leon Gross, Principal, Audubon Technology and Communications Center. I appreciate your sentiments, Director O'Halloran. I do know that it is, and it continues to be, a struggle for us at the school at Audubon. But initially what we did is we actually came up with areas within the school that the students themselves, as well as the staff, designated as areas of use or restriction. And so in theory, we came up with red zones, which were really all instructional areas should be respected in that capacity. So that may include outdoor learning activities. It may include obviously classrooms, but the students themselves needed to understand that that is a sanctity area, and we have to make sure that we're honoring that. And in compromise, the teachers said that we will allow students to use cell phones at lunch, because we know that there are times when some of them are older siblings and they have to check on siblings. Some of them in the high school are receiving jobs and looking at opportunities. And so that sometimes is their only way to contact, these particular businesses and other. And so the compromise was we would allow you to use those cell phones daily during your lunchtime, because that's your time. And so again, it was a challenge for us as a staff, because some of us have practices where we're kind of firm and we're kind of stern around this is the way that it's supposed to be. But we had to really humble ourselves to the student voice to say times have changed. And so the use of cell phones now is so common that it's almost like people wearing watches or other pieces. It's literally attached to them as a part of their person. And so we wanted to let the students know that we heard them and that we wanted to be fair so that they understood we cared about them as well. And so even with that piece, it's not perfect. And as you heard me mention before, the initial implementation of that practice did reduce our suspensions. But as time goes on, you have to reacclimate students to practices, and you may have new students that are coming into the school. And so now we're dealing with another issue related to that, which again is coming back to the table. We have to now come back again and think about how do we refine our practices so that we can continue to promote a positive learning atmosphere.
Thank you.
President Peterson, any follow-up or any other questions?
No, just thank you. I really appreciate hearing about the importance of student voice and the humbleness in terms of, yes, we have to, it's a continuing process, yes. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
We all have the same questions, so that's that. When I saw a 30% reduction, I was excited about that. I have had the chance to visit your school several times already. Mr. Gross actually was rather impressed with it. Mr. Jagaman also recommended that I call you. I decided to wait until after we actually get back so that I can actually sit down and meet with some of your student leaders and their groups, just to get some input from them and see it working in real life. I'll say it that way. So I will give you a call and set that up so that I can be there at the best time possible. Otherwise, I'm excited about it. Keep up the great work, and thank you.
Thank you. I also just want to quickly say thank you for coming out here and the work that you've done and giving them that allotted time for that phone usage, because we talk about the youth that's on our phone. As adults, we're on our phone too. So we have to be very honest. And I probably was that one parent that would text my child during school hours, probably a little better now. So when a lot of times they do say, hey, it's my mom, I'm pretty sure 90% of the time it was a mom just figuring out how the rest of the day was going to go. But I look forward to seeing the continued work that you do. And also, like Vice Chair O'Halloran, for that policy or procedure, if you can send it to us, it would be a great tool for maybe some other schools, just high schools or something, to institute and keep the suspension rate down, as well as getting that student voice in our babies as part of the policy and process of them as well too. Any other committee members, have any questions or comments for the administration? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for coming on and continue work that you do with our babies and families each and every day. Now, Madam Secretary, I would like to go to the public. I do know we have public comment. I just wanted to make sure we aligned it and did the differentiate with the administrator as well as the OC, our presentation. So how many people do we have waiting on the platform?
We have 5 individuals registered to speak on this item. The first individual registered is Angela Lucas Foley. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucas, space Foley.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am presenting on behalf of the Anti-Racist White Educators of Milwaukee. Last month's written and verbal testimony focused on accountability from the Board of Directors. We received responses from administration regarding our questions. We are grateful for those responses, but important questions and concerns remain. Again, I address the school board directors of this committee. At December's PACE meeting, Director Leonard and Chair Taylor asked specifically that data be shared at the grade band level, i.e. elementary, middle, and high school. Though there are concerns for privacy, there is room for increased support and an increased review and revision of policies and practices related to suspension and discipline across the district. The community is interested in this information as well. Board of School Directors, what is the status of this request? At December's PACE meeting, President Peterson stated in response to the school presentation by Carver, quote, "The building of collective positive culture necessitates frank discussions about race. If we don't have those types of conversation, the culture won't be as deep as it is." Chair Taylor continued saying, maybe working with schools that are in the transition process, showing how the work needs to continue. End quote. What evidence does the board have that courageous conversations about race is being used and embedded into school systems at a local level and at the district level as a whole? As a board, have you received meaningful updates in regards to this work? The community is interested in this information as well. What evidence does the board have that the drafted 3-year anti-racist and biased professional development plan is being implemented with fidelity? In May 2015, then President Miller authored the Black Lives Matter resolution, in which he quoted W.E.B. Du Bois. The quote emphasizes the importance of belief, trust, encouragement, and defense of Black youth. As our elected officials of Milwaukee Public Schools, I ask in earnest, are you doing everything in your power to trust, encourage, and defend our Black and brown citizens of this community?
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Gretchen Kafferman. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Gretchen Kafferman, K-A-P-P-E-R-M-A-N.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Taylor and members of the board. I am testifying as a member of Anti-Racist White Educators Milwaukee. Last month's written and verbal testimony emphasized board accountability. Our testimony was responded to. While we are grateful to the administration for those responses, we continue to have concerns. I appreciate the presentation by Principal Gross from Audubon Middle and High School, especially regarding the meaningful inclusion of students in making decisions around discipline. The wider district could learn from your actions. I still have concerns that student input is not acted upon while doing OCR work district-wide. I worry that the published reports are simply checking OCR resolution boxes. Check, yes, we met with students about discipline. Looking at this month's presentation, we know that there were 135 student discipline committee meetings. However, I still have questions, and all of these questions are regarding district-wide practices. How are students being chosen for these committees? Are some of the students on these committees impacted by out-of-school suspensions? If we are truly to do the work required of OCR, students who have been suspended must have a voice in root cause analysis, policy writing, and feedback to policy implementation. What are the recommendations from student discipline committees? More importantly, what evidence does the board have that these recommendations are being used in a meaningful way? When students, parents, and community members bring up concerns or possible solution, how does MPS follow through? Answers to these questions do not need to have student names or schools connected to them. Student voice is central to solving disproportionate discipline. As Principal Gross can tell you, I'm sure. Members of the PACE committee, please work with administration to involve students who have been affected by out-of-school suspensions in substantive efforts to eradicate discriminatory discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the platform is Michelle Hilbert. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Hello, Michelle Hilbert, Michellehilbert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Taylor, Chair Taylor and the rest of the board for this opportunity. Administration put 5 broad proactive approaches to address disproportionality. I loved seeing that DELT, that I don't remember what it stands for, the application of the Courageous Conversations to systems district-wide. I see that more folks will be focusing and analyzing, expanding, developing, evaluating, implementing, a whole range of verbs along Bloom's taxonomy. But yeah, again, the question is, who are these folks? Superintendent Posley said at the PACE meeting in December, that the transformation, this transformation we're working towards is critical. That including our young people and hearing what they have to say is critical, and every opportunity to share was appreciated. So what are those young people explicitly saying, as Gretchen just kind of delineated? The admin reports that there have been 135 student discipline committee meetings across all middle and high schools, but summaries from these discussions are missing from the PowerPoint. Please share with the district leaders, learn from the students what's working, what isn't. We especially want to know the ideas and reflections of students who are directly affected by the disciplinary actions. And this is similar for the student leadership summits. Another is going to be held in April, but we don't know what happened in November. Did the students find it useful, and how do we know? Where can we find these recommendations? The next steps that you list, that administration list, I should say, is hold meetings with the work groups and the focus groups. And I'm glad to hear about these variety of focus groups. Again, how are they chosen? And was anyone excluded, whether unintentionally that happens or otherwise, and especially in that student group? How are the groups accountable to each other and the wider district community? This info does seem to be missing from the report as well. As folks all over the world say, nothing for us without us. And as Principal Gross said, student voice and self-advocacy is critical, or are critical. Students generated these policy change ideas. Please more descriptively show how students are authentically centered in this work. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Larry Hoffman. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Larry Hoffman, Hoffman.
Thank you.
The anti-racist white educators are asking a lot of good questions. As a MICA member, my question is about the responsiveness of board and administration to community groups who have been testifying over the past months and years at PACE meetings in particular. Anti-racist white educator members who testified in the past several months and asked questions received responses from administration during December, and they were invited to a meeting of the Code of Conduct Focus Group. Are we members who asked questions at recent meetings were contacted and they received replies? However, to my knowledge, no MICA members have been contacted in reply to their questions or in particular questions I've asked at board meetings. I don't know whether our friends in the Black Educators Caucus or LIT were contacted with answers to any questions they've asked. For example, at the November PACE meeting, I asked about student summits. I asked, can you enumerate changes students have requested and which changes the district has actually made in response to student requests at these summits? At the PACE meeting in June, I reminded you that administration had told MICA long ago that community organizations were going to be asked to play a role in developing the equity guidebook. It was never clear to us what that role would be, but then you never did invite us. When you are contacting community groups, I hope none of us are being left out. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Lucas Weir. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Lucas Weir, Wierer.
We can hear you, but very faintly. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, I'll try to speak loudly.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. I appreciate the response from administration regarding next steps for helping to support schools that are struggling with high suspension rates. It's good to hear that there will be planned student focus groups throughout January, but I always wonder if we will hear from students most impacted or those who already have the best relationships with their school. In addition, I question how seriously you have considered the discipline committee's feedback. One ask from my discipline committee has been consistent and is as follows. These asks are not extras, but rather what a school should just have in order to be called a school. We need, and schools like ours need, all of our teacher positions to be filled by teachers. My school's had a science vacancy for 3+ years now. We had a Spanish teacher for a year and then the first part of this year, but that position is again vacant. For the first time since the
Madam Chair.
Yes, Madam Secretary.
I want to be sure that we are speaking about the item that we're noticed to speak about, which is the OCR report.
All right, thank you. Yes, if we can speak on the OCR report, but I'll also invite any other comments and stuff to be sent to board governance or via my email with concerns of other things. But let's just stay focused on this agenda item, please.
Okay, I'll forego the rest of my testimony, but I would suggest that some of our students act out in toxic ways because our schools are not meeting their needs. And as a result, when you have schools that have significant vacancies, we are going to have real behavior issues that our students are going to display, and our teachers are not equipped to deal with many of those behavioral issues. So while we have to do the self-work on anti-racism, and while we have to be better as educators, the district also has a responsibility to provide the same educational quality for students at Obama that they would for students at Reagan, the same educational quality for students at North Division that they would at Rufus King. Okay, because I think when we would look at the numbers, if we were to really drill into disproportionality data, we would find that many of the schools responsible for the highest numbers.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
that completes the public testimony for tonight. And thank you for encouraging Mr. Weir to send forward his concerns relative to staffing and staffing shortages, which may fit a different agenda.
No, thank you so much for that. Any committee members have any questions or comments on this item? I've seen Director Simpson and Director Leonard in that order, please.
Thank
Director
you, Chair.
Simpson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Yeah, so I had a question about the student discipline committees. They came up quite a bit in the public testimony, and just wondering, you know, how those are recorded, what the follow through is, how those are tracked, you know, how the students are selected. If you could speak to some of the questions that were just raised in the public testimony, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, I'm going to ask Mr. Jagman to speak to that one. John?
Chair Taylor, members of the committee. So a couple ways. Each school selects their student members. We ask them that they select students that are diverse in terms of grade band, race, school performance, gender, all those metrics to capture a diverse group like that, not just grab like their English 12th class or their student council that's elected elsewhere. So we do ask them to make it relatively diverse that way. In terms of at the district level, what we are going to do when we go out to those schools, we did this right when the Office of Civil Rights Resolution came, we did focus groups at schools. We specifically went to those schools with identified student names based on students who have been suspended multiple times. And we've gone to the schools and say, we're going to have a focus group. Can we ensure that the students are part of it? I remember at one of them, we even went in the hallway, found a few students that were in the hallway during class and kind of invited them into this focus group to have that. So when we do those more targeted focus groups in January, February, depending on how COVID allows us in the buildings, we as the district are going to be specifically targeting students who are engaged in school in one way and those who are kind of struggling with their engagement at school. But otherwise, the schools select their students for the student discipline committee, and we just ask that they are diverse along all of those metrics.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee also want to have Mr. Gross to weigh in on what's happening at Audubon and how it's done there as well. Mr. Gross.
Chair Taylor and members of the committee, Leon Gross, principal at Audubon, to also support and validate what Mr. Jegman has stated. We also selected students that represented a diverse group. And so in particular, we wanted to make sure that students who typically may be on the receiving end of the referrals had their voices at the table, because we want to hear what they have to say. And then you have the students that, you know, kind of middle of the road, may not necessarily have a lot of issues in school, but may be friends with both. Students that typically have some challenges, and then those that may have none at all. And so then that final third really represented the students who may not necessarily have any type of discipline issues at all, but are just overall concerned around all of their peers and want to make sure that there's an environment of success for each and every person in the building.
All right, thank you. Director Simpson, any follow-up or any other questions?
Yeah, I guess just the second part of that would just be like the follow through with those committees, like, you know, so the committee meets, you know, there might be some discussion or recommendations. Then on the school end, how are those conversations reported, just to make sure that there's some accountability measures in place? Like, we've had these conversations, this was our action plan.
Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, thank you for reminding me of the second part of the question. I apologize, I missed it. John Jagman, District Discipline Manager. So the school team enters those minutes right into a Qualtrics report. They put those in there monthly, so then at the district level, we can see what's going on. And then each school has a specific report with their recommendations. One of the questions we ask each school team each month is to select what follow-up has occurred since last meeting. It could be presented at a staff meeting, could be talked to administration, could be awaiting further approval. For example, I was at a school in December that talked about microaggressions, and they just did a general talk about what microaggressions are, things of that nature. Their follow-up is in January, they were going to be creating some short, like TikTok-esque, but very short videos of students explaining what different microaggressions are to share with their students. They're going to put some posters up and kind of raise awareness of what these might look like. So it does come down to the school level, but all that is inputted into the Qualtrics report.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That was a great example too.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee at Audubon, Leon Gross, principal at Audubon again. And one of the examples that Mr. Jegman spoke to is what are some things that we follow up with at Audubon based on data that our students look at, as well as recommendations and action plans. And one piece that Audubon consistently follows through with is the whole piece around restorative practices, repair harm circles. And so when you're looking at harm, there's a lot of harm that's done, not only to students, but also within the community. And it's important to bring those entities to the table, whether it's a teacher and a student conference, a student versus student conference. We've had teachers and parents conferencing. And so I think it's important there to really understand that every month we are looking at what is working, what is not working, and what do we need to refine. But in particular, ours has really been centered around repair harm circles, which has really been at the center of our success for many years at the high school level and now at the middle school level, even after discipline has been implemented, really having that time with the students to help them process what's going on and what has actually happened has helped to reduce the amount of repetition that we experience in schools.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. Director Leonard and then Director Vice Chair O'Halloran. Director Leonard.
Thank you. I guess the first thing is just a statement. We have asked for this before, so we need to get those some kind of summaries on those Qualtrics comments from the student groups. I'd like to get something back, and I know that may be asking a lot, to be honest, when I think about all of our schools, but even so, we need some kind of summaries, something to put our teeth into so we can really look at it. The other thing that I've noticed is that over these PACE committee meetings on this topic, I feel like as a board director that I am not always in concert with what our constituents are asking. And then we find out that administration has given them some of that information, but we as board directors don't even know that. And if we're going to be holding ourselves accountable, and we will be held accountable, I think we need to have some kind of communication process that at least says these many schools or this much information has been given, and make sure that each board member is aware of that, at least from this committee, so that we know. Because I had no idea that administration had gotten back to you, to those people. So it'd be good to know that, because I do respond with some of them on a regular basis. I think that's part of the responsibility of being a board director. So I'm hoping that we can somehow do that without, I hope we don't have to do that without having to get a resolution together for that. I'm assuming we can just ask for that and we can move forward on that. And then I think the last thing, and I don't want to take up too much time, is I did take notes on this. I was looking at this afternoon, looking at my past notes on this SEAM group with OCR. And I do believe that we still get into a habit of doing a lot of box checking. And I think that we really need to start pushing ourselves and making sure that we're much more substantive when we're looking at change. I do believe that it is happening in many of our buildings, but the way it's reported to us at this meeting is not always the way that comes through. So when I heard what Mr. Gross said, and I got a real picture of something, that really helps me feel better about what's going on. But I'm the kind of person that needs to see it and hear it to really know that we're making a difference for our students and our staff members in our buildings. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go to administration. I do know at the last meeting and also with Dr. Mann, they were stating that they were going to follow up on questions. Dr. Mann, I don't know what it would take if definitely the PACE committee receives that they have answered questions, but I do remember you all telling us that and in pre-PACE that they were reaching out to those individuals. So Director Leonard, I don't know if you didn't hear it, but we do need some other type of form of communication or details with email. I think would be great too. And that's why I'm often asking that the individual's email or we reach back out to them, because that's also documentation of things that were answered and it gives a record of what's going on. So Dr. Mann, I guess I will ask you what will be the correct way while I'm just throwing it out here, that PACE will be able to get the information that the administration actually did reach out or provide answers to individuals' questions.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, what we could do in the Office of Board Governance is to ensure that the committee actually receives a copy of the administration's response for each one of those concerns or requests for information. In the same manner that you get the packet of concerns or information requests prior to any meeting with a high volume of individuals who are requesting information on a high value topic. What we would do then is to attach the responses and send those out to committee members as well. We can take care of that in the Office of Board Governance. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, for this committee and for this item, you would like to know the administration's responses to the individuals who submitted information request. We can definitely compile that information.
Yes. And thank you. And now administration in reference to some of the other questions or comments Director Leonard had.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, the administration will be more than happy to provide those summaries. However, we do have to remove student names as well as teacher names out of those summaries because they get in detail about various topics and they use names and those kinds of things. So we'll be more than happy to provide that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
Madam Chair.
Dr. Mann. Yes.
Members of the committee, and this is a question for the administration based on the state statute around student security and things of that nature. In the information that is being requested, it is my understanding that the request is for grade level information versus school by school, because the board members have expressed some concerns about information being put out relative to a school in reference to enrollment and some other things. So it's by grade level, not individual student and not individual school. Is that the correct request? I just want to be sure that the administration is providing the information and the high level that was requested.
For me, I would say yes, because I know we had to be careful on names and singling out different students or staff or babies. But then I will revert back to Director Leonard because I know he asked for specific information just to ensure we understood him correctly. Director Leonard.
Yes, I would agree with that. I do by grade levels. I don't want to, Mr. Boswell spoke to this at the last in December's meeting. So I do agree that we do not want to point out schools. I don't think that's a wise route to go. But when we come to the summaries, it's just their ideas and what they're coming up with. And if it goes by grade levels, that's great. I definitely do not need any names. I need nothing that detailed. I'm just trying to make sure that we get a very clear idea of what our students are coming up with.
So noted.
All right, thank you. Director Leonard, you still have the floor. I did say the administration. You still have the floor. Was there any other questions or comments, or did you get the answers to those you've asked?
Oh, you know what? One other thing. Mr. Hoffman from Micah, he brought up those questions regarding the community not being involved. Could you answer to that? I'm not sure where we are with that.
Thank you. Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of Department of Student Services. I know for a fact that Micah was contacted, the individual. I don't know if it was Mr. Hoffman or not, but we would be more than happy if we can be provided the email addresses of all the individuals which spoke on this item tonight. We'll be more than happy to invite them to our January 12th, 2022 community focus group, which will take place at 6 p.m. To 7:30 p.m. We are in need of community voice. I think when we do have community voice-based meetings, we don't have enough voices at the table. We send out the information to many community groups, but only few participate. So if they can provide us with their email address and any other community-based business or social service agency that would like to be involved in this community in this process, we welcome. So if I could be sent directly, if Dr. Mann or any member of her wonderful staff will provide me with email address, numbers, we'll make sure that they get the information. We need their voice. That's the only way it works. We need them to come to the table and have those discussions. And then that leads into our overview of the student code of conduct, which by state statute and by school board policy has to be a citywide discipline committee. That's why we need them. This can't be changed or cannot happen without them. So this is part of the process. So we ask them to please be present. We welcome their presence. and I will do anything I can do to make sure that everyone is contacted.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
members of the committee, we are actually in process of scanning and emailing Mr. Boswell the speaker list from tonight and compiling the information inclusive of any responses to Micah relative to the OCR report.
Oh, thank you for that. Any other committee members have any questions or comments on this item? Vice Chair O'Halloran.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. I earlier sent 2 questions to Mr. Jagman and Mr. Boswell from a student. One of the students at Reagan reached out to me with a number of questions covering finances, segregation, disproportionality, so lots of subjects. So I think the 2 questions that I forwarded earlier, I'm just hoping I can get a response. They kind of boil down to, like, in these reports, we get a lot of what currently is occurring and what we're doing about it. But there, the question is more around why. So if you can provide any insight into, like, what you think the greatest impediments to changing, because once again, just calling back to the numbers that we see, we're at 80%, and that was 80% when we initially had the OCR review, and we're still at that. And so I know we're working on it, but do you have any? I would anticipate that there are myriad reasons, but if there is any response you could provide around what the greatest challenges are, that would be helpful. And then if you're able to respond to the 2 questions I sent you earlier, that would be great, so that I can help this student get their project in a timely fashion.
Yes, Chair Taylor, members of the committee, I definitely think that, and I'm going to also call on Mr. Jackman to respond to the question. I think those questions would be best answered with the student, as well as with a student focus group from Reagan. So we do plan on doing that directly, and we'll do it through Zoom or in person in reference to his questions. Yeah, but Mr. Jackman.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. Yeah, I would say, 1, have the student reach out to myself. We can, the student group at Reagan is very dynamic. They engage a lot of great conversations. I think hosting a session there to talk about this would be beneficial. And I will just add, there's a lot of research out there, and it does come down to the root cause, but some of the areas we're focused on as a district is ensuring that we are defining our behaviors and our code of conduct, which is the work that we are continuing. Again, we did that a few years ago, looking at the role of bias in staff members at all levels, and how the role of bias plays itself out in these little decision-making things that occur. Looking at student voice is another big research-based area of addressing disproportionality, which is why we're doing that. Creating space to talk about race, which is why we're engaged in that courageous conversation about race, just creating more and more space for staff, students, families to talk about race, talk about all of our data through the lens of race, talk about everything that's occurring through the lens of race. And then the 5th way that we are looking at is, there's different terms for it, but how students are re-entering a space after discipline, which is a lot about that repairing harm that Mr. Gross talked about. And just anytime a behavior occurs, how is that student or students re-entering that space and making sure they're part of the community and all of that. So those are the 5 big areas that we are focusing on across the district, but it does look different in each school, which is why that root cause analysis is key.
Vice Chair O'Halloran, any other follow-up or questions or comments?
No, thank you for that. And I just wanted to go back 1 second back to the principal from Audubon. I didn't mention it before, but I really love that you've mentioned twice, you're like, we're not perfect, but I would say, I think all of us welcome progress over perfection. So please, I really appreciate all of the efforts that you're doing, and I appreciate the progress. So don't beat yourself up. None of us are perfect.
Correct. Any other board member have any questions or comments on this item? No, seeing none. Madam Secretary, I do believe we only had one item for tonight.
Madam Chair, you are correct.
So early night. So thank you all for joining us for the first 2022 PACE meeting. For those individuals still listening and had other questions, please reach out to the Board Governance Office so that we can address them as well too. And thank you, Madam Secretary, for always jumping in to keep us on the straight and narrow and let us know which way we should go. And Happy New Year to all. You guys have a great day. Be safe. I know some numbers are rising, so stay safe. Love on your family. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Chair Taylor.
Thank you.
Have a good night.